join me in welcoming to the stage the CEO of Good Leadership Enterprises and the creator of the Good Leadership Breakfast, Paul Batz.
I learned about our speaker when my son, who was a sophomore in college, was in a World Societies class. This magazine right here was prescribed as one of the textbooks for that class. He gave me this copy as a Christmas present in 2011. At that time, it was called Ode magazine, and its subtext said, "For Intelligent Optimists." It has since transitioned to the Intelligent Optimist magazine. The title of the publication is Giving is Good, and the subheading here says, "Giving improves health, spreads wealth, strengthens social bonds, and, best of all, it's contagious." I read this magazine every dot and comma, cover to cover, several times. And it was in the process of consuming this that I made the commitment to the goodness message. So 4 years ago, when Erin, who works in our firm, most of you know her, when she joined our firm, I sent her an email copy of The Intelligent Optimist, and I said, "Hey, this is my favorite publication. Our goal is to figure out how to do something special enough where this guy who created this thing will come and speak at the Good Leadership Breakfast." She sent me that email last week to remind me. So what I've learned in the process is that you can learn a lot about people by reading their stuff. I know a lot of you read my stuff. And Jurriaan and I started an email conversation back and forth about what it would be like for me to be able to give him a platform to continue his message, and maybe we can figure out a way to help each other. So what I know is this is a man who's been a really broad thinker for a long time. He's really one of the founding partners of this thought called solution journalism. Because the journalism that we consume on a regular basis is definitely not solution journalism. I've learned so much about it. We had a gathering last night of a very few people to talk more deeply about some of the solutions that he sees for the planet. I can give you one sort of pop reference for why I think Jurriaan Kamp is so cool. He introduced the world to Deepak Chopra before Oprah did. So you know what? Let me introduce you to somebody that I really admire, Jurriaan Kamp.
It's an honor to be in cold Minneapolis, but you're so used to it, and I should be, but I'm more of the rain and the drizzling rain of the country of my birth, the Netherlands. And I'm very happy to live these days in California where the sun always shines, because as I always say, I've seen enough clouds and rain for the whole of my life. So I want to talk today with you about stories, because I believe that whatever our lives, how we create our lives, how we create our societies, how we create the world, our businesses, that happens through stories. The stories we tell each other, and also the stories we tell ourselves. And there's a lot wrong with the way we tell stories these days, and I will talk about that because it has a lot to do with my trade, if you like, the trade of journalism and the news that you consume, and we all, watch and read every day. But to give you a positive example of what stories can do, I want to go to a book that this year was published 175 years ago. And it is not exactly timely to talk about that book in February, but please allow me to do so. It's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. That was a storyteller of his day, of his time. And in these days, of course, there was no television and no radio, and whatever people told each other happened through books and, whenever they saw each other. So Charles wrote that book, and we got to know him as a writer who was criticizing the world he was living in, the starting of the Industrial Revolution, where people were exploited, and there was a lot of poverty and things that he was concerned about. And he addressed that also through that famous story that we all know. But the impact of the story, that is what I like so much. The impact of the story was when people read that story, which sold out in almost hours at the time, it had an immediate impact on what people started doing. Giving, charitable giving, immediately happened. People got it through the story they were reading. So in that day, in that year, 1834, when that book was 1833, I think, was published. That Christmas, suddenly people were caring about others who were not so well off in their society around them. So that is the impact of a story. But today we have other stories we share. I only have to briefly remind you of the cruel story we all live in today. For something happened in Florida 2 days ago. And the impact of a story like that is as deep as that story of Charles Dickens was. Times a day that you are consuming the news. Today, we live in a very different world, that the news is with us every moment of the day. So I think the tendency that we have always had to focus on whatever goes wrong in the world, which is what in most newsrooms where I got my training as well, is the focus. But the focus in the past 20 years, and there's a quite exact moment when that started to happen, the intensity increased tremendously. And the intensity increased because of the fact that we got familiar with the concept of CNN. CNN brought us 24-hour news, something we didn't have prior to that. It started in the first Gulf War in 1991, and there we got it. Suddenly, news was everywhere all the time. Not that there was more news, and that's the beginning of the problem. The news was, of course, the same. The bomb had only exploded once that day, but suddenly it kept exploding every hour, on the hour, on and on and on and on. And that did something. Here's a statistic that I'm not a social researcher, but I think you easily get the message. Between 1990 and 2010, according to the World Health Organization, in the world, the incidence of depression increased at 300%. That is between 1990 and 2010. When I said CNN started in 1991, the correlation is almost perfect. At the same time, in that same 20-year period, the world population grew at 40%. So 300% more depression, 40% more people in the world. We also know that the depression statistics in countries like India and Nigeria, where most people were born in these 20 years, they will be not very reliable. So most of the depressed people live in the Western world that we live in, which means that that enormous increase of depression completely correlates with that cycle of the news that is now every time, everywhere. You can't even get gas anymore or be in an elevator without being told whatever is going wrong. It's a big problem. It is a big problem that all of us here in this room know this name. If I say Kim Kardashian, there's nobody who's going to say, I don't know her. Is it relevant? It's completely irrelevant. Nothing, this woman, and I appreciate whoever she is, but she has not contributed anything you and I need to know. So, but you don't know about Matt Svensson. And Matt Svensson did something very important. This is a critical thing. You're sitting on a chair and we're walking this beautiful carpet. It's drenched in flame retardants. Why? Because we don't want fire in this room. And I agree with that. Of course, we don't want fire. But the chemicals that are being used in the aircraft seating and here and everything, in baby cots, wherever the same stuff we use is very carcinogenic. It's the worst stuff for our health. We need it, so it's a very bad trade-off. So this Matt in Sweden, 10 years ago, figured out a different way. He was able to create a flame retardant based on citrus. And that citrus does perform better in labs than the stuff that we are sitting on or walking on here or sitting in the aircraft with. So, but the point is, you don't know it. I happen to know it because that is what I do for a living. But the problem is that we do know Kim Kardashian, and we don't know that this great solution is there. We don't know that we can change the world of communications through something, this is a word, remember it, the word Li-Fi. You have never heard of that. Wi-Fi, you know. Li-Fi is internet over light. Very soon, light will give you your connection. So you turn on the light, and that light will give you your internet connection. Very important contribution, because radio waves interfere with everything, interfere with our bodies, and they cause interference. That's why we can't use them on airplanes. That's why we can't talk on the phone while we're getting gas. So interference is a problem, but not just with instruments, also with our bodies, the cell structure. So in any event, something that is based on light doesn't interfere, it's healthy. So we need to know about that. It was invented in 2005. This room, nobody knows it. I take it as a fact, almost, because I've done this a few times before. So Li-Fi, we need flame retardants that are healthy. We need to know that there are almost no more homeless people in the state of Utah. You don't know that. Why? Because it's not in the news reports you get, these stories are not written. It's a program that started in 2007, and you need to know everything about it. But I'm not going to tell you now, because we don't have the time for that. But these kind of things, subscribe to my magazine, it's one way to do it. But so even worse, this news that we're getting, I mean, it was already bad enough that CNN thought that we had to get the same bomb in our room all the time. Now we have an additional element in this whole drama of the news, and that is what we then call social media. There, and once again, there's a much longer story behind it, but the simple thing is here that clever computer guys in Silicon Valley figured out systems that basically feed us with the news we want to know about. And that means that it always basically reaffirms attitudes we already have. So you think that something happens again and again and again, and that may be true, but it is mostly based on your own search patterns and whatever you do when you're online. So and I'm not even talking about the fact that alone, the confirmation of certain attitudes, and that doesn't help us to open up to new perspectives and seeing things differently, which I think we agree we always need. But if you add to that the concept of fake news that we now also have, where people just put in stories that are not even true, we create a whole different world, and it is far more scary than I can tell you in a few minutes. So, what is all this is doing? It's undermining our society. It's ultimately undermining our democracy. But not only that, it also, back to the depression, it undermines our personal lives. We know by now, most of us know, that it makes a difference what you eat. How do you feed your body? So whatever you put in your mouth has an impact on how your health and even on how you feel. We kind of got that now. That just living from McDonald's alone doesn't make us healthy. We realize that. Okay, but why would it be different? Whatever we put in here and put in there has the same impact, of course. These are also perception organs. So whatever we feed our eyes and our ears has the same impact as whatever we eat. And it's even proven. If you connect people to the measurements of blood pressure and whatever else you can simply measure, and you have people watch the news for 15 minutes, the whole system is in chaos. And then people will say, well, it doesn't apply to me. Well, I can tell you from that research, it impacts everyone. Some people can deal with it better than others, but it impacts everyone. And so then the same research shows you need another 15 minutes to recover. So basically all that news, what we do, disturbs our bodies, our systems, our feelings of how we look at the world and how we relate to other people. And then we would need, but we don't do that, 15 minutes to recover. And we know from research that all of us, on average, spend an hour a day watching, reading the news. So against that hour, you would need to meditate at least an hour, which I challenge you, probably most of you don't do. So if you want to come up with old solutions to the problems you face in your business, in your work, in your daily life, you should definitely watch the news. If you want to come up with new solutions and want to contribute something meaningful, you definitely should not, and totally not. It's not just a little bit, I would say just forget about it. It's not helping you anywhere, because there are other ways to find your stories. That is through the connection of people. We share today, when we're sitting in settings like this, we share with each other what's happening. And I learned last night from people more than I could do, when we were having a nice dinner that Paul had organized. I learned more from the conversations with people than I could have learned from watching the internet news or whatever else there is on screens or on paper. So about this concept of that Paul stands for good leadership, I want to say, connected to my idea of media consumption, leadership, we tend to think, has something to do with taking care of others. And I'm not saying that is not true. It is true. I mean, the leader in a team is someone who guides, and whether it's a servant leader or a leader who leads from the top, it doesn't really matter. But there is this idea of managing the team, guiding the team. But I will say that probably an even more important factor of leadership is how you lead yourself. And that is, how do you contribute yourself? I think we're here as people to contribute. That gives our lives meaning. Whatever it is that we can do to make another life better, that is simply what makes life fulfilling. There is nothing else that is as fulfilling. All these research, you know that too. But the point is, we get all these wrong messages. We again, watch television where we are told that happiness is something you can buy, whereas we should know by now that the true happiness comes from the sharing with people. So I will say, leadership, practice that in a personal way, and then you will find out that the first thing you need to do is find out where it is that you can contribute, how you can lead a life that is meaningful for yourself while serving others. Of course, I need to say a few words about optimism, because that is the road to the journey that I went on. People mistake optimism sometimes for a way of looking at the world in a far too unreal and way, like seeing things that are not there. The famous story of Pollyanna was that she was saying about the man who had lost one leg, that he should be happy that has still had another leg. And that is not the kind of optimism that's very inspiring. So optimism is not a definition of reality. It is not something from like this is optimism is an attitude. It's more a verb. It's something how you approach reality. It's how do you respond. The best story on optimism is really from Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived the Nazi death camps, and after that wrote this book, The Meaning of Life, which is a short and very good book, which I would recommend to everyone. But he says in German, life ultimately is about, as he writes it in German, trotzdem ja sagen, which means, despite everything, say yes. And that is yes to the situation you're in. Because if you step out of it, even in a death camp, yes, that is it. That is the end. But if you can move into the situation and say, well, there is something I can do. I can still say yes to something, even in that almost impossible situation. And that is something, if he could do that in a Nazi death camp, of course, for us, it's so much easier. And that is what we should treasure. So that is what optimism is about. Optimism is not to change, to say things that there are no problems in this world. There are problems in this world. There are many problems. But that is also what makes life fun. Because ultimately, who we are problem solvers. Nothing in our world is more important to us than that feeling that we have been able to create something that wasn't there, or to solve a problem that was there. So that is where our focus should be. We should that inherent attitude of finding ways to contribute, to solve a problem, to make something a little better. That's why you see it always that people, when they move into a new home, they start painting the walls, they start doing things to make it theirs, to create. And that is inspiring. I remember one of the very first stories I did for the newspaper that I started working with all those years ago. I was sent to a guy, there was some kind of economic crisis, and we read little stories about companies that were working well despite the economic crisis at that time, the recession that was on. And I was meeting with a guy who had a little company, you know, these crates where you put beer bottles in, they're plastic, and you know, you can recycle them forever and keep putting beer bottles in it. And at some point, also these things come to an end. And this guy had a machine, he put these crates in, one end plastic crates, and other end came out plastic bowls. I have no clue what he did with these bowls. I can't remember that anymore. What I do remember every day is the energy, the enthusiasm of that guy. He inspired me ultimately to start doing what I needed to do. That is, for instance, you know, what we now call solutions journalism. And the inspiration came from someone who knew how to contribute, who had found his way to do something that other people were not doing. And that is what we should be doing, because we all have our unique personal contribution. There are 7.5 billion of us. There are just not enough problems for us, that we don't have enough problems to solve. Too many solutions in 7.5 billion people, if we want to do that. So, how do we do that? I think I was a correspondent for 5 years in India, and for me, that was a life-changing experience. Of course, India is a very different country from what we know, but there's still a democracy and there's a market economy. It looks very similar, but it is not. And so it challenged me in many ways. And of course, you come across the great leader and inspiring force in India, Mahatma Gandhi. And there's one story that always speaks to me, and that's what I want to leave you with. When you ask your question, how do I contribute? So Gandhi once got, a businessman came to him and he asked Gandhi, well, Mahatma, can you help me think? I need to make this decision on where I go with my business. I can do A and I can do B, and I don't know what to do. And Gandhi looked the man in the eye and said, okay, imagine the poorest person you know. And if you know that person, if that person's on your mind, think about what you want to do, whether it's A or B, and think about the impact of what you're going to do on that person's life. And then you know the answer. Maybe today, it's not always about the poorest person, although it still can be, because poverty is an issue in our lives today. But all of us know, with any decision you make, whether we are serving someone else's life. And that is, I think, what we need to do. So yes, I am an optimist. And I know that I can contribute. But so can you. And so can all of us. And we do that through the stories we tell each other. Thank you.
Hello again. Optimism is a happy subject. There was lots of really good energy in the room here. We had a wonderful conversation debriefing his talk. I didn't know what he was going to say. That's one of the joys of discovering what happens when we invite speakers. We have several things that we're going to talk about. I want to help you get to know this guy a little bit more. So you live in the United States here in Santa Barbara, which has been in the news a lot. You flew there to mainly look at your property before you came back here to Minnesota when you flew from the Netherlands. What did you find when you went back to your house in Santa Barbara?
Well, I knew that, of course. I haven't been in that house in the past, for 10 days only in the past 2 months. I mean, we were evacuated twice, first for the fires and then for the mudslides. And these mudslides, I must say, they devastated the community of Montecito, where I live, which is part of Santa Barbara. And my home was not impacted directly. That is, the house is there, but the garden around it and even the road to it is completely destroyed. So it's hard to get to the home, and it will take time for that to recover. But my problem is not very close to the ones that lost people, loved ones, and even their whole home. So, but it's devastating what nature can do, and it tells you something about you know, life is not always easy. Just in case I was not clear enough, but we don't control everything, right?
So, in that context, as I was preparing for about a year ago when I reached out to you to ask if you'd come here, I ran across a really honest and kind of raw article that you wrote on Forbes.com. And it relates to the fact that many of these people I bragged a lot about the Intelligent Optimist magazine,
Yeah.
but alas, you can't actually find it anymore because it doesn't exist. No. So can you tell us what happened?
Well, you know, the journey that I went on in '95 when I started the Road magazine in the Netherlands and then brought it to the US in 2003, and then from there on it became the Intelligent Optimist magazine. And they published so far the last issue in the summer of 2016. We haven't published in 2017, and we now only do the Optimist Daily online as a daily news service. But to answer your question, that time frame of from '95 till now, these almost 25 years, is the same time frame that the internet came into existence. And the internet changes everything, but definitely also the world of media. You know, there's now a whole generation growing up thinking that news is something you get for free. Well, that doesn't pay the bills. That doesn't lead to good journalism, and we need to figure that out. Well, in that time frame, we have struggled. I have to say that as much as I try to contribute, and I spoke about that, on a personal note, it has been definitely hard. And I've seen, despite the best intentions, I've seen things that I definitely didn't like. I mean, the reason that you don't find the magazine is because it couldn't be published anymore because there was not enough money for it. That means there are still bills to be paid. And here's the guy saying we should take care of each other and we should help each other, etc. And I have freelancers out there who tell me, and yes, hey, I wrote for your magazine and you still haven't paid me. So to be clear on that, you pay a toll for many things in your life, and I'm still trying to resolve these things that not only impacted my business, but even impacted also in a different way my personal life and my family. So just to confirm, there are always darker sides, which, by the way, make the need for, okay, and what do we do now, which is the verb of optimism, if you like, optimizing, even more necessary.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So you live in the Netherlands and the US. You go back and forth all the time. Give us a little bit contrast comparison between the society in the Netherlands, which is very healthy, and also you live in California, which it's got its own culture. So can you just share a little bit?
I mean, there are many things in Europe, Western Europe, that are better organized than in the United States and in many parts of the world. The way people take care of each other is just better. And that I always like to tell the story that I grew up in a home. My father was a conservative politician. And he represents the Liberal Party, or represented the Liberal Party, and that is, to make matters crazy in words, the Conservative Party in the Netherlands. So it's the right-wing thing. So, but it also is kind of telling that the Liberal Party is the Conservative Party. Yeah. But in any event, I have learned at the table over dinner during high school everything that is wrong about socialism. I can tell you everything, because my father has made sure that he told me that. But never once did my father say that healthcare in the Netherlands was a socialist system that was wrong. Never once. He never came to... Again, every topic that socialism addresses, he told me that they did it in the wrong way, but he never spoke about healthcare. So I come to live in the United States, and this whole thing about Obamacare becomes an issue, right? And people, my friends, start telling me, this socialist medical system. I'm thinking, if this were truly socialist, my father would have told me, and he never did. So there you go, where Western Europe is doing a better job when it comes to these things. The simple reason why I am here is that where Europe is better is at the level of government. And government is important, but government doesn't change the world. What changes the world is us in this room, is people, is business, and these are people doing new things. Now, where are the most new things undertaken? In California. That's why I'm there.
Yeah, very well said. So last night at our dinner, you fascinated us with how seaweed might be a really big part of our future. Can you give us the 1-minute story about why you're so optimistic about seaweed?
But it's a very big story.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay, seaweed, very briefly. 40% of the world lives along coast, within 50 miles of the coast, for the world population. So that means that we are always close to the oceans. In the oceans, we can grow seaweed. We don't need to do that, it's already happening, but we can cultivate it, we can do more. What can we do with seaweed? We can turn it into gas. Very briefly, it is far more productive than shale gas, which disrupts everything in the environment. But not only that, shale gas is over in 3, 4, 5, 6 years, 7 years perhaps, but then it's over and you only have the environmental destruction. Seaweed, as long as the sun shines and there's water in the ocean, will be there. So that's one reason why it's great for biogas. It can go into the same gas lines we already have, which is different from solar energy. We need batteries and storage for that. We need to invest in that. Costs money. Seaweed can be done for cheap. The infrastructure is already there. But now, the main thing. We are getting to know the fact that we're being told all the time that there are hidden costs of our entrepreneuring, of our businesses. That hidden costs would be global warming or air pollution or things like that. Now, hidden costs, obviously, for fracking and shale gas, very clear. Now, seaweed comes with hidden benefits. Because when you have seaweed, you not just get the gas. After you take the gas out, you're left with something that is animal feed, which is good because then we can feed animals instead of growing crops that go to animals instead of feeding people, so that people get more food. Then, because there is seaweed in the oceans, there is more protection for fish. It leads to regeneration of fish populations. We can use seaweed to produce fresh water because that comes out of it as well. We can use it for cosmetics. We can use many ways. We can even make clothes from seaweed. So there are all kinds of external benefits, hidden benefits in seaweed. And this is well more than 1 minute, but I can go on for 10 minutes on this one.
So all the financials and advisors in the room are going, seaweed.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
No.
So you mentioned Viktor Frankl's book.
Yeah.
Do you have another book that you recommend, a favorite of yours you think would be good for us to read?
Yeah, despite the fact that you prepared me, I find it a hard one. Because I see so many books and there's always one. You know, well, maybe this is what I will say. And I'm guilty first, so I can speak from personal experience. I tend to buy and read mostly non-fiction books. And I even started my journey when I realized that I worked on the Monday through Friday in the newsroom. And then I was only working on problems. In the weekends, I went into the Amsterdam bookstores where I lived at the time, and I was buying books, I realized, on solutions. And I thought, hey, there's a disconnect. In the weekends, I do solutions, and during the rest of the week, I do problems. And so that was the reason to start the magazine. But nonfiction, people who say, you know, like Paul writes his book and I write them, it's all beautiful. But the other day, I had a conversation with someone who said, yes, but you learn more from nonfiction. From fiction.
From fiction, yeah.
Because the storytelling, and was I talking about storytelling, it inspires you, it helps you to think differently. So maybe my answer is not a particular title, but maybe my answer to is, okay, read more novels and let yourself be inspired by stories.
Very, very nice. Last question. How do you see goodness pay? You have a much broader perspective in global travel and the people that you hang out with. We'd love to benefit from that experience of yours. How do you see goodness pay?
Well, okay, so my personal inspiration there is Yvon Chouinard, who started Patagonia. And you probably noticed the company that sells the outdoor stuff, right?
We buy a lot of that stuff here.
Okay,
Yeah.
I guess there is a need, right? So Chouinard really only started the company to do good. He had no other reason. He started these things, the crimpons or whatever they called it, these things you need to put into the wall so you can climb, and nobody did it the way he liked it because he wanted to climb mountains. So he said, okay, I'll produce these things myself. And that started the company. And then he thought, okay, well, I can do this and I could do that. But always his driving motivation was, okay, I'm filling a need, I'm solving a problem. And when I speak with him sometimes, he says, I don't know what to do with this money. It keeps coming. So if you, it's so much money. And because the needs he fills, there's so much need for it apparently, people buy. And so goodness pays, yes, that for me is an example. And I'm always happy to see that example because we sometimes think we need to compromise. We need to do something that we know is not exactly right. You were talking, about clients. You think, yeah, should I do that? Should I not do that? Well, I understand that. I have done things that I think I should have done that. But Jurriaan never compromised. He did only what he wanted to do. And it paid. So goodness pays.
Very well said. Thank you very much.
And thank all
We
of you.
really appreciate it. Absolutely.